The engagement had been nothing more than a deal, sealed in silence. You were not naive, you knew Jungkook wasn't the type of man who would ever fall in love easily, much less with someone forced into his life. Still, the sting of his indifference cut deeper than you had ever imagined. He rarely spoke to you, and when he did, his words were clipped, delivered in a voice that carried the weight of command, but none of the warmth of affection. At dinners, he would sit at the head of the long table, scrolling through his phone while you sat across from him in a suffocating silence. The only sound was the clinking of silverware and sometimes his quiet sighs of impatience. When you tried to start a conversation, his replies were short. How was your day? Busy, don't wait up for me tonight. And that would be the end of it. No glance, no smile, only the cold wall he built around himself. He was seen often in public with other women, more prominently Soyeon, the woman who once held his heart. She was everything you were not confident, glamorous, a piece of his past he seemed unwillingly to let go. Even though you knew Jungkook wasn't betraying you physically, the way he let Soyeon linger close to him, whisper things that made him smirk, was enough to hollow you out. You once overheard her speaking softly to him outside his office door. You have changed, Jungkook, but at least with me, you can easily be yourself. Don't push it so soon. You're here as a guest, nothing more. His words were sharp, but the fact that she was there at all while you were not alone near his words still twisted your heart. The guards at his mansion reflected his coldness toward you. They respected you on the surface. They would bow, open the car door, and call you Miss Wine, but their eyes betrayed a lack of true regard. They treated you not as the future lady of the house, but as an inconvenient presence. One night, when you tried to step into his mansion without knocking, the guards blocked the doorway with an unspoken firmness. Mr. Jones is busy. You can't go in. I'm his fiance. I don't need permission. Orders, miss. Please return to your house. Humiliation burned your skin as you turned away, realizing they only dared to treat you that way because Shunko colluded, because in their eyes you were not truly his. That was the life you were living, engaged to a man who commanded empires yet treated you like a stranger in his world. A man who made you question if fiance was nothing more than a title with no meaning at all. The drive to Jungkook's mansion had been filled with nervous anticipation. For once you were not dressed for formality or pretense, you had chosen a soft dress that carried a quiet elegance, paired with a shawl that reminded you of warmth and home. Tonight you wanted to bridge the endless gap between you and him. Maybe he would see you not as a stranger, not as a burden, but as the woman standing beside him. The mansion loomed against the night sky, its tall iron gates glistening under the glow of the lamps. You stepped out of the car with a steady breath, clutching the small box of sweets. You had brought a silly gesture, perhaps, but it felt like a piece of peace you wanted to offer him. But as soon as you approached, two guards stepped forward, crossing their arms. Their expressions were uncomfortable, as though they didn't want to say what they had to. Miss Wine, we can't let you in. You blinked, taken aback. Can't let me in? What do you mean? This is my fiance's home. Guard 2 shifted uneasily but stood firm. Mr. Jones gave strict orders. No one enters tonight. The word anyone lingered in the air like poison. It wasn't just anyone, it was you. Your fingers tightened around the box in your hands, your pride battling against the ache swelling in your chest. So, even here, I'm not welcome. From beyond the gates, faint laughter floated through the air, carried by the music spilling from the open windows. Your heart clenched the moment you recognized the voice. So young she was inside, her laughter bright and unstrained, mingling with Jungkook's slow murmur. It was a cruel contrast to standing in the cold night air while she enjoyed the warmth of his company. You drew yourself straighter, refusing to crumble before the guards. I see, then I'll wait here. Miss, it's better if you return. The weather. If he wants me here, he will come. The first raindrops touched your skin, delicate at first, almost kind. You lifted your face toward the sky, letting them fall like whispers of truth. You would not beg, you would not fight. You would simply stand your ground no matter how long it took. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing more. They remained in their posts while you stood silently outside the gates, unmoving and yielding, waiting for a man who had yet to decide if you were worth stepping out for. And then the heavens opened and the rain began to pour. The sky unlatched itself like a curtain, and the rain came down in sheets, relentless, cold, insistent. At first, it was merely an irritation against your skin. By the time it turned into a downpour, your shawl clung to your shoulders like a second saturated skin, and your dress pressed to the hollow of your collarbone. Every droplet felt magnified. The slap of water on your hair, the steady cascade down your face, the small involuntary shivers that ran through your limbs as your body fought to keep warm. Your hands numb at the fingertips press that little box of sweets closer to your chest as if that fragile thing might somehow protect you. The iron gate behind you glinted with rivulets, the mentioned lamps making halos in the rain. Sound was reduced to the drumming of the storm and the occasional rustle of the guards' coats. Even the music from inside the house had been swallowed by the weather. Standing there, you felt absurd and exposed, the absurdity sharpened into humiliation by the knowledge that you stood outside the home of the man you were promised to. The guards shifted uncomfortable in the downpour. One of them tucked the collar of his jacket higher, his jaw working as he tried to find the words that would justify what he had done. They watched you, eyes flickering to your shaking shoulders, to the way your hair plastered across your forehead. Every instinct in them told them to help. Every order told them to hold the line. You did not beg. Pride had become your quiet armor. Dignity, fragile as it was under the rain, was all you had left to keep. You lifted your face to the sky and let the cold hammer across your cheeks until it felt like the world was wiping you clean of hope and expectation both. Then the heavy front door opened. For a breath, the two of them stood in the doorway, Jungkook in a coat that kept its dignity even under the rain. Soyun beside him, a picture of composed irritation, as if the weather were an affront to her very person. At first, his posture was relaxed, that habitual reserve settling over him like the cut of his coat. He stepped out casually, hands in his pockets, and for a moment the sight of him was like the electric stab of a memory you had hoped to overwrite. And then he saw you. The effect was immediate. The casualness dropped from his shoulders like a clock. His eyes widened, not with surprise alone, but with a flicker of something older and more dangerous, a sharp concern threaded through the shock. You watched the change happen in him the way you had watched a summer sky shift before a storm sudden inevitable. Without thinking about the soaked hem of your dress, without any regard of the formalities that usually kept him distant, he crossed the yard. In two long strides, he closed the space between you and took you into his arms with a force that was equal parts possessive and protective. You smelled the sharp tang of his aftershave and the clean, cold scent of his coat as he pressed you against him. There was no theatrical flourish, only the bare practicality of someone shutting out the world to keep a single thing safe. Why didn't you let her in? The question was soft, but it cut through the rain like a blade. The guards flinched as if struck. Because you told us not to let anyone inside. Jungkook's stare hardened, and the voice he used then was the voice that had men obeying his orders without thinking. It was low, edged with an anger that sprang from something far older than annoyance. Wine isn't anyone, she's my fiancée, and for this you will all pay the price. What he said was a verdict. The air around him seemed to tighten. The guards' faces drained of colors as they realized the depth of their mistake. Yet, even in that fury, there was a line drawn, a protective vehemence that had nothing to do with the punishment they would receive and everything to do with the fact that you had been allowed to suffer on his watch. He did not spare you a single cruel word, as some might expect from the cold facade he wore every other day. Instead, his hands cradled you, palms warm through your wet clothes, fingers knotting at the small of your back as if to ensure you would not slip from him. For the first time in a long time, his expression cracked in a way that exposed him, a tightness at the corner of his mouth, a shadow of guilt passing through his dark eyes. I waited. He drew back enough to look at you properly, rain streaming down both your faces. There was an intensity there that did not belong solely to anger. It was concern, stern, and almost guilty. You shouldn't have had to. Soyun, standing a step behind him, had gone from composure to awkwardness. She tucked a wet strand of hair behind her ear, eyes sliding away when Jungkook's hands tightened around you. Whatever play of emotions had been between them inside the house was instantly eclipsed by the gravity of his focus on you. The way he barked his order at the guards made the message unmistakable. This woman was his, and no one, not mood, not memory, not misread instruction would be allowed to diminish that fact. He stepped closer and shrugged off his coat, the fabric heavy and warm, and wrapped it around your shoulders. The gesture was simple, but it felt like an apology and a vow folded into one. Get her inside, towels, hot water, now. The guards moved suddenly efficient, scurrying to obey as they parted to let you pass. Chunguk's hand lingered at the small of your back, guiding you toward the shelter of the house. His voice, when he spoke again, had lost the rasp of command and carried instead an edge of something quiet and fierce. You're not to stand in the rain again. Do you understand me? Yes. The rain kept falling, turning the world into shades of grey and silver, but within the small orbit of his arms, you felt, for the first time that night, warmth that had nothing to do with the coat around your shoulders. It was a dangerous kind of warmth, the sort that belonged to men who controlled empires and also unexpectedly to the man who had just claimed you in the rain. The rain did not let up. It seemed determined to drown the night in its merciless rhythm, but Jungkook didn't care. He held you tightly, your shivering body pressed against his chest as if he could feel the cold away by sheer force. For a long time, he didn't move, only breathing in the reality of you trembling in his arms, the wet strands of your hair sticking to your face, the sharp tremor of your breaths. Finally, with a sharp exhale, he shrugged out of his coat. The heavy rain dampened fabric slid from his shoulders, and he draped it firmly over you, adjusting it so it swallowed you whole. His hands lingered on the lapels, tugging them closer around your frame. Jungkook's fingers found your hands next ice cold. Shaking, he enclosed them in his thumbs rubbing along your knuckles with rough urgency. His jaw flexed, a muscle ticking under his skin as fury and guilt varied in his eyes. For the first time since you had been bound to him, something cracked in his cool composure, his gaze soft and flickering with regret so raw it seemed to silence even the storm around you. He had given the order, the careless command that no one be let inside, and because of it, you had suffered. This is on me. You blinked up at him, lips trembling, but no words formed. Your teeth chattered instead, the cold stealing your voice from the side. So Yoon shifted, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The air between the three of you was heavy, not with rain, but with an unspoken truth. She watched the way Jungkook held you, the way his hands refused to let go of yours, his body shielding you instinctively. For once, her presence seemed irrelevant, edged with discomfort, perhaps even jealousy, but Jungkook didn't spare her a single glance. His focus never wavered from you. Without hesitation, he bent and swept you into his arms. The movement was effortless, practiced as though carrying you was the most natural thing in the world. You gasped softly at the suddenness, your fingers clutching the front of his shirt, but his hold only tightened. Open the door. The gates and the front door alike flew open, his men scrambling to obey, their fear of his wrath overweighing even the storm. Chungkook strode forward, his steps long and certain, ignoring the rain that pelted his back. So Yon stood frozen at the threshold, watching as he carried you past her without acknowledgement. Her name not even on his lips. In that moment, the hierarchy was made clear. You were not just anyone, you were the woman he had claimed as his fiancée, the one he had chosen to protect even against his own mistakes. Inside the mansion, warmth enveloped you, but it was Jungkook's arms that anchored you. His coat draped over your trembling frame, his chest steady beneath your cheek, and his silence, thick with unspoken regret, spoke louder than any declaration. For the first time, his coldness faltered, and you felt the dangerous fear of a man who had finally realized what it meant to risk losing you. The grand door swung open with a heavy groan, and warmth enveloped you instantly. The contrast between the storm outside and the golden glow of the chandeliered hall was almost cruel. Yet, Jungkook didn't pause to savor it. He carried you straight through the corridor, past the startled maids who bowed quickly, their eyes wide at the rear side of their master holding someone with such urgency. Hot water, towels, blankets, and bring soup now. The staff scattered at his words, their footsteps echoing against the marble floor. He lowered you gently onto the leather sofa in the living room, his coat still wrapped tightly around you. Droplets of rain slide from your hair onto the cushions, but Jungkook didn't seem to care. He crouched before you, his usually composed expression storming with emotions you had never seen from him: anger, regret, something dangerously close to tenderness. Without a word, he reached for a clean towel. One of the maids hurried to hand him. To everyone's shock, yours most of all, he dismissed them with a curt note and began drying your hair himself. His large hands moved carefully, the towel rough against your wet strands, but his touch gentler than you expected. His jaw tightened, and under his breath, barely audible above the patter of rain against the windows, he muttered, I should have known better. I should have protected you. He looked at him startled, but his eyes didn't meet yours. They were focused on the simple task, as though the towel between his hands was the only thing anchoring him. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke again, this time his voice low, deliberate, as though he needed you to understand. I told them not to let anyone in tonight because Soyun wanted to talk about business and the past. I didn't want interruptions and I didn't want you to see her here. I thought keeping the doors closed would spare you discomfort. Instead, he trailed off, his thought tightening. His hand lingered against your cheek for a fraction of a second before he pulled it back. Instead, I made you stand out there like a stranger, like you didn't belong here. That was my mistake. The words were simple, but coming from him, John Jungkook, the man who commanded with ice in his veins, they carried a weight heavier than any vow. For the first time, you saw the man beneath the ruthless facade, the man capable of regret. You swallowed your lips, parting to speak, but his gaze locked onto yours, cutting you silence. His eyes, usually cold, unreadable, were dark with something raw, something unguarded. You're not anyone, Wine. Don't ever think that again. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, the only sound filling the quiet that followed. The storm outside continued to rage, but here, in the sanctuary of the mansion, something had shifted. The walls Jungkook had built so carefully around his heart had cracked just enough to let you glimpse the man he could be when his pride wasn't in the way. And for the first time, his coldness no longer felt like rejection, it felt like fear. Fear of losing something he hadn't yet admitted he wanted to keep. The storm had quieted to a dull murmur outside, though its memory still clung to your skin. Wrapped in Jungkook's coat, you sat on the sofa as warmth slowly seeped back into your bones, yet tension lingered in the room, sharp as a blade. The two guards were summoned into the hall. They entered hesitantly, had sport, rain dripping from their soaked uniforms. Their shoulders were stiff, but their faces betrayed dread. They had witnessed their boss fury before, but tonight felt different. Jungkook stood at the center of the room, his posture rigid, his gaze sharp enough to power still. He didn't speak at first. He let the silence stretch heavy and suffocating until both men shifted uneasily under the weight of his stare. Finally, his voice cut through the quiet. You watched her stand in the rain. You saw her shivering, drenched, humiliated, and you obeyed my words without a single thought. Tell me, do you have no sense of judgment, no loyalty to the woman who will be my future lady? Sir, we were only following your orders. Please forgive us. We never meant her harm. He looked at them, their trembling forms, their voices thick with desperation. Something in your softened. They were only pawns and Jungkook's watched word. Men trained to follow his word like law. It wasn't cruelty that kept them from helping you, it was fear. Your lips trembled, your voice quiet but steady. It's not their mistake, Jungkook. You told them not to let anyone inside. They were just obeying you. His eyes flickered toward you, dark and unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, his jaw tightening as if wavering between anger and reason. Then finally, he gave a curt note. You're right. Relief washed over the guards, their shoulders sagging as they dared a glance at you, gratitude hidden in your eyes. But Jungkook wasn't finished. He took a step forwards, his presence looming, his voice low and razor edged. But listen well. Both men straightened instantly. Next time, if she stands before you, freezing, pleading, or even at the edge of her strength, you let her in. My orders mean nothing if they put her at risk. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Joke's glare lingered on them for a long, punching beat before he dismissed them with a flick of his hand. They bowed low, casting one last look of silent apology your way before hurrying out. The room grew quiet again. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his eyes finding yours. There was no softness in his tone when he finally spoke, yet the weight of it carried a promise stronger than any vow. No one will ever treat you like an outsider again. Not in my house, not in my work. And though his voice was still cold, the way his hand found yours warm, steady, grounding, told you everything his pride would not let him admit.